Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to CFL Talk. As usual, we have David Morasuti here, and we have a very special guest in Morley Scott, does the play-by-play for the Edmonton Eskimos. A few years ago, we were joking about the Toronto Stampeders. I think right off the start. Thanks for being here, firstly, but I'm so excited to talk to you and about the Edmonton Argos. How's it feeling in Edmonton with this going on?
Yeah, I guess they're collecting guys who have Grey Cup rings, and they've gone into Toronto's roster and really rated it, especially the defensive line. So yeah, it's I think people are pretty happy here. People are pretty excited about what Ed Hervey has accomplished through the communication week in the Canadian Football League with free agency. Now everybody just got their fingers crossed that everybody who's out there rumored to have agreed to a deal actually signs it come Tuesday.
David?
Yeah, it's been a wild start, and it got even wilder when the league says, "Oh, by the way, the salary cap is going up." And
there's another thing, right? That came out early yesterday, and a lot of people are saying, "How does this change things?" I think I find it pretty hard to believe that the general managers did not know that the salary cap was going up when they went into free agency week on Sunday of last week. They had to know. I mean, they didn't decide that Monday and Tuesday before they announced it Wednesday morning, right? So I think people are thinking, "Oh, now the team's got extra money to spend; they can go out and make a better offer to players they've lost." But I think GMs knew going in that they had that money coming, and I think most deals, I believe, will probably say. I can't remember. I don't know if you guys do. I can remember what they've done this for 5 or 6 years. I can't remember anybody that we've heard of off the top of my head that reneged on deals that said they were going to sign and then didn't. But obviously that possibility is there come Tuesday, because after Sunday, teams can't talk to those players anymore, right? And their own teams get to talk to them between Sunday and Tuesday when free agency hits.
Maybe my memory is not very good, but I seem to recall that part of the agreement that they had with the Players Association referred to a rise in the salary cap, if I remember correctly. I'm wondering if this is on the schedule that it originally was determined. I didn't bother to think of that, but right now I was just thinking of it myself, that there was that automatic rise in salary that was due, and I think this might be part of that. Maybe that's why the general managers haven't really talked about it a lot. I don't know.
I was led to believe it was due to revenue in 2024 and the extra revenue that they generated. So, like I say, they didn't just find that out on Wednesday when they made the release, right? I think they knew that ahead of time.
It sounds a little. The CFLPA basically are the ones that went, talking about it and putting it out there more than anybody.
Yeah, they put the release out first, and then the league put one out as well later on in the day yesterday.
Yeah, it's interesting. That part I'm sure wasn't a coincidence with that one, but we know, like, and when you talked about it too, Marley, like the league and the owners and the general managers and the coaches were all together for the winter meetings. I don't know how in any of that there would not have been a conversation about the salary cap going up, and if a team didn't know, team wasn't doing their job, or the team maybe was sleeping in that part of the meeting potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. They had to know. That had to be part of the discussion. I think they had it at their meetings in North or South Carolina a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, I don't think it plays a role into how teams would have negotiated if they had known. I think it's just a poor timing for the announcement from the Players Association and the league that it came out in the middle of communication week.
Well, we're not suggesting it's the possibility of the owners and the general managers didn't want to remind the players they were getting a raise, which probably would have put. Well, I can understand how some people would think it would add a little extra pressure on giving a player more money. I could see how that sort of idea might be a little fertile.
Well, the pie gets bigger, right? So everybody wants a bigger piece of it.
Oh, I'm sure there's some players who maybe like really couldn't have done this a few days earlier, because I'm sure there's some players right now who agreed to terms and maybe didn't. But again, the CFLPA knew this increase was coming.
Yeah.
Word gets around. So I feel like when you're seeing all the mass exodus of players from different teams, this $400,000 increase in the salary cap certainly lends me to believe that players knew this was coming. And I've heard many times from teams where it's like, we give our offers to the players. We tell them, if you can go get something better on the free agent market, go have at it. If not, come back to us and let me know what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. Players and their agents and the GMs all knew that this was coming. It was just poor choice of a time to announce it. It should have
Yeah.
been last week. Everybody outside of GMs and the agents and players knew that this was happening because it kind of all the fans and some media kind of went, "Hey, well, how does this change things for all these deals that are made?" And I don't think it changes things at all.
I'm inclined to agree with you because the amount that when you divide it between a lot of players, over 3 dozen players, it's not that much money when it really comes down to it. I mean, every league, well, except for, well, anyway, it's got to change in the tens of millions to have an impact in any way as far as players are concerned
Yeah.
in the Canadian Football League.
Well, it's $400,000, right? So
Yeah,
that's a real good player in the CFL. A guy who impacts games makes around 200. So that's two players like that you can go out and spend that money on, or you can give raises to guys. I think what it does more than anything else, I don't think it helps you go out and get guys so much as it helps you keep guys because you can now give guys who deserve and earned a raise. You can give them that raise to keep them on your own team.
I think what keeps players is there's two things that keeps players. Money is a factor for sure. Another factor for CFL players is how much more you can earn somewhere else, and do you want to win a championship? And then the other thing is, do you feel comfortable where you are? We've got two teams here that we follow. We've got Edmonton and Toronto. And David, while we were off the air, I was joking with Morley, and as I said on the air, joking about the Edmonton Argos. We went through that with Calgary. We brought in a lot of people from Calgary that won a lot of rings. And Morley, you talked about the rings, and you're talking about the excitement in Edmonton. For those of us outside Edmonton, I can tell you from my perspective, I am really happy for you guys that you're getting that kind of excitement.
Yeah, it's been a long time since the comments on their Facebook page and the reactions on Twitter and social media were positive around Edmonton. I mean, it got better at the tail end of last year, but it's been a long 4 years in Edmonton. I mean, they came out of COVID and won 3 games the first year, 4 games the next 2 years, and were better last year and increased their win total last year. But still, it's been a tough go, and this team. The fans of this team aren't used to what they've seen the last 4 years. They're used to teams always being in the playoffs, always contending, and I mean they haven't been in a playoff game since 2019 when they were in the Eastern Final and lost that game. So yeah, it's been a tough go. It's been a tough go for everybody around the Double E. That's for sure.
What's the excitement level going on right now with Edmonton? Given, like, it seemed like it all sort of started a little bit with the new owner coming in, and he's trying to kind of break away from what's happened the last few years. But do you truly think that the fans are really receiving that message right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, a lot of things have changed. I mean, from a year ago to where we are now, it's a totally different organization. Obviously they're single ownership now with Larry Thompson, who came in, and Mr. Thompson's done a great job changing a few things. I mean, the presentation at the park has been a little bit. He spent some money on that, uh, and obviously working behind the scenes, improving things. And then they hired the new president in Chris Morris, who then hired the new general manager in Ed Hervey, who then hired the new head coach in Mark Killam. And I think people are excited because last time Ed Hervey was here, he won a Grey Cup. They weren't happy when he was fired and let go in what was that 2017, and so they're happy to have him back. And I think it's kind of funny. I look at it's kind of flipped around a little bit between the two sports franchises here. Oiler fans were tired of the old boys club. They didn't like the fact that all the old Oilers were running the team for a long time, and they were fed up with it. But the Elks fans are happier because the old guard's coming back. They don't seem to mind the old boys club. And of course, it's the difference between winning and losing, right? If the old boys club, as they call it, would have won with the Oilers in that terrible stretch of 10 years that they had, then everybody would be happy with them. So, they made their changes. They brought some familiar names back in Ed Hervey. They've got a very recognizable head coach, a guy who's been in the league for 20 years. Only the third Canadian head coach that Edmonton has had, and the first one who was born in Edmonton. He moved to Lethbridge shortly after when he was very young and grew up in that area. The only bad part about him is he was 20 years with the Calgary Stampeders, but I guess he's cleaned that up now, and he's going back to green and gold now, and shedding the red and white. And also he played for the Alberta Golden Bears too. So he's a guy who's got Edmonton roots, and everybody's excited to see what this group can do. They've already seen some of it, obviously, with the moves they made off the field with Larry Thompson and Chris Morris. Now we're seeing Ed Hervey do his work for the on-field process, and everybody likes what they've seen. Wholesale changes to this Edmonton Elks team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, they're going to have a brand new defensive line. They're going to have a brand new defensive backfield as they go into games this year.
You see, I'm not surprised even when I saw all the additions on the defensive line. You look at the very first, what kind of led to this mass exodus from Toronto to Edmonton, and that's, Coach Maxey, who was the D-line coach in Toronto. He's now over in Edmonton, and I heard a lot of good things in terms of what he did with this Toronto group, how much the players really gravitated towards him. So it's not surprising that maybe along with a nice little raise in salary, they also get to work with a coach that they're very familiar with.
Yeah, and that's another guy who everybody's happy to see back in Edmonton too. I mean, he'd been in Edmonton. He had just to tell you what a good person and what a real good coach Demetrius Maxey is. He had jobs in Edmonton under, I think, Mark Killam will be his 5th or 6th head coach. Through all the coaching changes from Jason Moss pre-COVID to the changes that were made throughout after COVID, and then into Chris Jones again. He'd been there through it all. He'd had about 4 or 5 head coaches. He left last year to go to Toronto. Got himself a Grey Cup, and then he comes back to Edmonton now, and I'm sure he was in on a few phone calls to some of those guys on the defensive line when the communication week opened up.
When you also look at, now, obviously the defense is going through the massive overhaul. I think it's also safe to say that that's not the only area that Edmonton was hoping to see the improvement on, also at quarterback and on the offensive side. With Trey Ford back, and we heard Trey talk about it not long after he signed that he didn't think he was going to be back. What's your sense of how the team is approaching him, and what's been probably a very frustrating start to his CFL career?
Yeah, I think it has been, and it hasn't been. I mean, he had 18 starts in his first 3 years in the CFL. Not many quarterbacks get that many starts in their first 3 years in the CFL. A lot of them have to wait. I think we're going back and looking. I think Mike Riley had 1 start in his first 3 years with the BC Lions, right? He got an opportunity to play, and he played well at times. He struggled at times, but he's electric, and I think that's what everyone loves about him, and he's just such a problem for defenses to handle because of his athleticism. What he needs is an opportunity to play and play consistently and not be looking over his shoulder. And he's going to get that. They're giving him the keys to the car this year, and he will be at the top of the depth chart going into training camp. He'll be at the top of the depth chart when the regular season starts, and he'll get an opportunity to play. And if he doesn't play well, he'll get an opportunity, I think, to play through it and keep that job. So it's very exciting. I know he's changed his kind of off seasons up a little bit. He is now living in Edmonton. His wife and daughter and have moved to Edmonton with him. They're here now, so they're working now at Commonwealth. They're working with the training staff and the medical staff, so that one thing he's trying to do is get stronger so that he can stay healthier next year. He's had a couple of injuries in his career that have forced him to miss a good chunk of games. So they're working on that. He's working with the new offensive coordinator Jordan McSimic, who has moved here as well. So they're going to be face to face, and they're going to be in the meeting rooms. It's not going to be Zoom. It's not going to be over the phone. It's going to be face to face every day. So I really think that Trey Ford's taken this seriously and is ready to take the next step in his career. And just in case, they got Cody Fajardo there as a backup.
There's a question that, like, for those of us, David and I have spent the last couple of years wondering why he didn't get the kind of chances he gets. Not that it matters, because looking back isn't that important, but just for the reporter in us that are curious about the stops and starts that he had and being the starter. he was really on a yo-yo. I don't know how
Yeah.
a person
Well,
takes
he
that
was and he wasn't, right? Like, I mean, his first year he came in, he played his first game in Hamilton on Canada Day and won. Came back against Calgary, was playing really well, but got hurt in that game,
Yes.
and he missed pretty much the rest of the season after that. He came back and he started late in the year. I think the final game of the year when Taylor Cornelius was injured the week before that, and he started the last game of the season. Then the following year, he came in and he played much better and was kind of in and out of the lineup that year. And then in the third year, he got hurt again, right? And he got on a roll, and he ended up getting hurt. And then it was between him and McLeod Bethel Thompson going back and forth. And when he came back, they gave him the job back. They didn't keep going with McLeod Bethel Thompson, even though he had played very well. Like, he had a great year last year stats wise. He just didn't get the wins, and the wins in the start of the season weren't the quarterbacking. It wasn't a problem at the start of the year for the Elks. So and then Ford got a chance to play, and he played pretty well. He came back from injury and was okay. And then they went to him and they gave him the ball. Then the playoff spot was still on the line for them. And once they were eliminated with, I think it was a couple of games to go, they said, okay, he's the starter for the rest of the season. Let him get a chance to play and move from there. So they got some good tape on him. They got a good feel for him. That coaching staff is gone now, but obviously the tape's still out there, and the Elks decided they want to move forward. And Trey Ford's a guy, he's the only guy who's won games on a regular basis for the Elks over the last 4 years, right?
Exactly.
From Taylor Cornelius to McLeod Bethel Thompson, those guys just didn't win games. Nick Arbuckle as well. At one point, they just didn't win games, and Trey Ford comes in and win games. So he wins games, and I'll tell you what, he sells tickets too. Everybody loves watching him play. And I think, obviously the marketing team can't dictate to football ops, but the marketing team was pulling for them to go with Trey Ford because he sells tickets, he sells merchandise, and I think that's part of the reason everybody knows that, and they're going to give him an opportunity to really be the face of the franchise for the next 3 years.
Ironically, he's a lot of fun to watch, but for him, it hasn't been a lot of fun because of the injuries and such. There was talk about his commitment to the team and to the work. It's not really important for you to answer that question, but one thing's for sure: the commitment is. There's no question now. He's moved to Edmonton, and that says commitment more than anything could.
Yeah, absolutely. He's ready. He's the commitment is there for him. I think people kind of, I think, because he was getting, pulled in and out of the lineup, was starting one week, not starting the next week, not starting when people thought he should start. I thought people were frustrated for him, and I think people thought for him that maybe there's some kind of disconnect there, but I don't know if it ever happened. I know he left Edmonton at the end of last year, and he didn't think he'd be back. But then when the new regime came aboard, that's the first thing Ed Hervey did was he sat down with him and he talked with him and got him under contract. So, it was an important move for the team to make, and they made it, and Ed Hervey made it quickly too. I think he signed him a lot faster than I thought. I thought that it might go until this week. It might go until free agency, and he might want to look around and see what kind of offers were out there. But Ed got to him and laid out his plan, got to know him. They got to know each other, and they decided to make a deal because I think if you look around the league, this is the best place that Trey Ford had to be a starter in the Canadian Football League. And I think he saw that, and the Elks needed him, and the deal was struck.
You know what else speaks to the fact that he's really important to Edmonton and they have a lot of faith in him? Ed Hervey's not the kind of guy that likes dealing with people who've been somewhere for a time. When he moves in, he likes his own people around him, and that includes the players. And so Trey Ford, for him to want to keep him, that means he really thinks a lot of him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he had a chance, for a clean start, but you don't have to wipe the entire slate clean. It's not like there were bad players on the Edmonton Elks over the last few years. There's been some great players on this team. The team hasn't been good, and that's been a lot of things. It's been injuries, it's been coaching, it's been some players not good enough at some positions. This team has some really good players, and that's what Mark Killam has always said. He said, I remember talking to him, it was earlier in January, and I sat down with him, and he just said, this isn't a bad team. He'd watched the entire season over again, and he looked at the film, and he just said, this team had no breaks. I mean, everything went against them. 3 straight walk-off field goals to win games at one point. This team is a better team than people think. It's way better than their record was last year. That's for sure. I mean, what did they start? 0-9 last year. It was terrible. And they were not. They were an 0-9 team, but they weren't an 0-9 team. I know you are what your record says you are, as the old football saying goes, but they're much better than they were over the last couple of years. And I think a lot of people have thought they were going to take a step the last couple of years, and it's just never happened. I think it's going to happen this year. And now with the changes that have come, I think they're going to be a better team than they were last year.
Well, they say defense wins championships, David.
Yep.
Well, that's it, right? I think you look at how the last few years have gone, especially when you look at how Toronto won their Grey Cups recently. Defense, I mean, look, you have to make plays on offense, but your defense can play a big role in how things go. And even like I look at even when Winnipeg was winning their Grey Cups, you look at Montreal when they won their Grey Cup. It's always been that defensive mindset, the shift to making sure you have the playmakers on defense that can make those plays. So when I look at what Edmonton's doing, it makes a whole lot of sense, right? Put a little bit more time and effort into solidifying that defense. And I know, I mean, Toronto fans, you ask them like that, losing Jake Ceresna was probably the biggest one out of all of them. And I'm sure Edmonton fans are happy to get him back because they never wanted him gone in the first place.
Edmonton definitely won that trade now.
Well, they ended up with both of them, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I know with Curly, like that was more of just unlucky breaks for him because injuries have kind of really been plaguing him the last couple of years. But how do you think he's taken that we obviously didn't get a chance to see him this year, but how did in any conversations you've maybe have had with him, how do you think his mindset has been through all those injuries and the pressure of him being a part of that trade?
Yeah, I don't think there was any pressure for him coming here. I think it helped him that McLeod Bethel Thompson was here because he had a good relationship with McLeod, and he had that great year with 1,000+ yards with McLeod a couple of years previously before the year he got injured. He fit in fine. He was the go-to guy early in the season. He and McLeod, you could tell that they have that chemistry, and he had a really big season. He stayed healthy last year. I look for more big things from him this year, and right now he's the number one receiver on this team. They have lost 3 of their top 4 receivers from last year. Gino Lewis has gone to Ottawa. Dylan Mitchell was released. And Curly's the only guy left, right? So right now, he's the guy on offense as far as receivers go.
When you look at, I mean, we can maybe look at a little bit of some of the general CFL news that's been going on, but out of all the rumored news that we're seeing right now, what's the one that's kind of caught your eye a little bit here?
With the
any team, it could be with the Elks. I mean, we'll start with the Elks first because obviously,
well, for me, the story of free agency so far, and I mean, it all has to come to fruition on Tuesday. But the story is not who the Elks signed. It's just the amount of players that they've gone out and gotten. They had a lot of free agents this year, and they're obviously walking away from a lot of their players from last year. But I'm just looking at my list here now: 4 defensive linemen, 4 defensive backs, 3 offensive linemen, 2 receivers, and a punter. They've all come to terms with. Cody Grace from Calgary today, and Tyson Middlemose from Calgary, the receiver today, have agreed deals apparently with the Elks as well. So, to me, that's the story. I mean, it looked like Ed Hervey was the only GM who actually knew Communication Week started on Sunday because he was the only guy signing guys. To me, that's the story is just the sheer amount of players that he signed. And I think that's to a certain extent a dangerous move because you're upsetting the chemistry on the team a lot. You're going to bring a lot of guys into the room who don't know each other very well, and they're going to have to have those bonding experiences to get them to become more of a team. But it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? As they say. So everybody hopes by the end of the year they'll have molded together and become a team.
Well, they weren't, like you said, they weren't the best the past couple of years. I think the change for the guys that have survived. One thing about football players, there's a lot of relationships that don't necessarily, that aren't necessarily the team you play for. There's college. There's all kinds of, connections that players have that maybe we, even the media, don't realize. So there's a lot to build on with a football team. Not all of it has to do with where you came from or where you were.
Yeah, and I mean it's a 9-team league, right? So everybody knows everybody
There
at
it
some
is.
point, and everybody has kind of crossed paths with guys throughout the year. Like, I mean, there's 3 defensive linemen coming from Toronto. They all know each other, so that's not going to be an issue. And Jake Sarisna was here for 5 years before that, so that's not going to be an issue as well. David Beard's coming back on the offensive line, so that certainly won't be an issue. He'll fit right in where he was, as the league's top center, basically. So yeah, I don't see it as a big problem, but I think it's something that they're going to have to obviously address. I think at the start of training camp, just team building and just getting to know everybody, because there's a lot of new faces coming. There's a lot of new faces coming.
Nothing won't cure that more than winning.
Winning cures everything, man. That's the thing. I mean, you win a few games, and your
best
spirits are
buddies.
higher, and the crowds get larger. As one player told me last year, he said, "When you win games, your breakfast tastes better, and your girlfriend looks prettier."
There it is, David.
I know it kind of like that's probably something that doesn't get brought up enough, is team chemistry, because we've seen teams tend to say that the winner of free agency doesn't always go on to win the championship. But I look at Mark Killam and I say this is probably one of the coaches out there that can probably get a team to come together. What has your conversations been like with him, and how he's maybe going to bring a new culture?
Absolutely. He's energetic. He's passionate. I mean, his opening speech at his introductory news conference had people just buzzing all over town. Yeah, he's. I think he's going to be good for this team, and I think you've seen his mark on a few of the things that have happened even today, right? They came to agreement with Cody Grace, who was his kicker in Calgary, his punter in Calgary, and Tyson Middlemost, who I think he only caught like 3 or 4 passes last year, but he had 9 or 10 special teams tackles working with Mark on special teams in Calgary. So yeah, he's putting his mark on this team, and I've already heard that from guys that they're excited to play for him. I talked to a few players who were either in the room at the introductory news conference or heard it on the radio, and they all say that, wow, this guy's exciting. I'm excited to get going because of what they've heard from Mark Killam.
He made a very valid point when we interviewed him at the winter meetings. I think you were there, Morley, when he talked about, I'm not that new talking to players. I'm a special teams coach. Yep. I'm probably the only other guy that talks to all the players. So he knows how to relate to a majority of the players that are in the locker room. So that experience isn't lacking in him. He knows how to start a relationship with players and probably continue it and be successful.
Yeah, I think all the coaches have relationships, obviously, with their own players, with their own group, and with other players. But there's only 2 coaches on a staff who talk to the entire team in meetings, and that's the head coach, and that's the special teams coordinator, because he has players from offense and defense working on special teams with him.
When you look at and this wasn't the only team that made changes to the coaching staff. You see what BC did when they brought in Buck Pierce. Do you think that we've constantly heard they go through some teams go through the old cycle with head coaches, but we've seen obviously now 2 first-year head coaches now are going to be coaching this year. What are your thoughts on that notion that maybe teams tend to circle the wagon too much?
Recycle them. Yeah. Like Major League Baseball does it, I think, better than any sport, right? Guys just go from team to team to team. That's maybe one of the biggest surprises to me when you talk about coaching jobs this year, is that Rick Campbell is not a head coach. A really good head coach who's won the Grey Cup and has had some really good teams in both Ottawa and BC. He's moved down to a coordinator spot with the Ottawa Red Blacks. So I think that shows you that and obviously there's a couple of first time head coaches as well. Throw in Ryan Dinwiddie, who's fairly new at it, and some other guys. So I think maybe that is changing, almost like the quarterback situation is too in the CFL. We're starting to we were in a situation where guys would just kind of of move from team to team when their contracts were up and wanted to make changes. But we're seeing some new faces now take over at quarterback throughout the league. Guys who had that start with one team, and then Drew Brown and Trey Ford. There's guys who are getting an opportunity to become starters now, and we're kind of changing it out, bringing in the young ones.
Yeah, but that's also the other point is that we're not losing the ones that were there that they replaced. The ones that
That's
they
true.
replaced are still around. Look at Arbuckle, ends up winning a Grey Cup. Did anybody have him on the bingo card when the season started? I don't think so. So
Well, yeah, he's an incredible story, really, when you think about it. You go back to, I'm getting my years probably mixed up, but I think it was 2019 in free agency. He was the hottest commodity in free agency, and he ends up signing in Ottawa. Then before he plays in Ottawa, he gets moved to Toronto, right? And then it doesn't work out in Toronto. He gets moved to Edmonton, and he went. I think he then traded to Montreal, right? And I think it went from, at one point, for him being the hottest commodity in free agency to being a guy who I don't think anybody's going to sign him. He might be done.
Potato.
And then all of a sudden, the right situation came up due to injury, and he gets himself back into the league, and now he's got himself a new contract, and he is the MVP of the Grey Cup game. So it's weird. You got to play the story out to the conclusion, right? And his has been an interesting one, because he's gone from that hot guy to a guy that I don't know if we're going to even look at him, to a guy who's the MVP of the Grey Cup game. So good for him for sticking with it. A great guy. Got to know him a little bit when he was obviously in Edmonton. Really good guy. And I'm happy for him for sure, because it's been a tough road for him.
Well, to both of you, I mean, we've got now a situation where, we all know that it takes a lot for American quarterbacks that come to the Canadian Football League to understand the game. It seems like the CFL and the general managers, the organizations, aren't wasting the investment they put in players like Arbuckle, and there's a few others now that are going to get that chance too. Even like where Drew Brown is, he's a guy who is upwardly mobile. But we've got other quarterbacks like Fajardo who don't disappear. He's still around. He won a Grey Cup. He's a backup. That's the thing that I'm amazed with the Canadian Football League right now, that we have a lot of really good, experienced quarterbacks who aren't starters.
Yeah, Jake Mayer in the same position as he
There
goes
you
to
go.
Saskatchewan after being a starter in Calgary, after being the guy who the Stampeders figured they could move out Bo Levi Mitchell because they had Jake Mayer, and then they decided Mayer wasn't the guy, and he had some good games, he had some good times, but he didn't get enough wins in Calgary, and so they made the move going after Vernon Adams Jr. And it is. I think it's cool that those guys are willing to take a step back. I've talked with Cody Fajardo since his move here, and he loves the game. He wants to keep playing. So he's going to come, and he knows the role he's got. He knows that Trey Ford's the starter. He knows he's coming in, and he wants to help Trey Ford in any way possible. But like he said, that doesn't mean I'm not going to try and do my best and go out and try and get some playing time. So he's going to be ready if called upon. But I think it's great that guys like him love the game so much that they okay, they're not going to be a starter, but they want to stay in the game somehow. And who knows, maybe something doesn't work out somewhere else or even here, and he'll get an opportunity to be a starter again in 2026.
Arbuckle's the poster boy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Keep at it. It's going to pay off for you.
Do you foresee Cody Fajardo? Like I know with Edmonton it's Trey's job, but do you foresee Cody Fajardo either, using this year to just kind of give himself a chance to stay in the league and maybe see another opportunity? Like, what do you think his mindset is?
I like I just said, I mean, he comes in knowing that he's in a position where he's going to be the backup. He took a pay cut. He got his contract reworked, and he knows that he's number 2 behind Trey Ford. But he also knows Trey Ford might struggle, might get injured, and he might get an opportunity. And I think he just is going to be ready for that opportunity. But he's going to support Ford in every way he can. And be ready if called upon. And if he does get to play a few games for whatever reason, or a few series for whatever reason, be at his best, and maybe someone will notice and keep it in the back of their mind for the future, for 2026, if somebody needs a quarterback.
Okay, Frank, I'll ask you this question.
Okay.
Where do you see Edmonton sitting in the standings next year?
Oh, you're a nasty piece of work. You
after
couldn't wait
a
till
couple
Morley
days
was
of banter.
gone? You have to ask me now. No, actually, I'll say the same thing I said last year, which is I thought Edmonton was going to be the most improved team because of Ford and because the team did play well. It just wasn't a very lucky team. Even that stretch of what was it? 30 games. What was it that they lost? Whatever it was that they lost in a row. I don't even want to
At home,
remember.
yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
even want to remember.
Yeah, it was, I think 23 or 24. It was
Something like that.
a
Anyway,
dark time, believe me.
that's not important. What's important is your question, David. And the thing of it is, and Morley, you can confirm or deny this. And David, I'll throw a question back at you again. Getting better is only the only thing that fans, the media, even the teams consider getting better is improving your lot towards the Grey Cup. I think we're in the middle of probably the toughest 9 teams to go through to make it to the Grey Cup. So I think a big improvement, a giant improvement for Edmonton is making the playoffs, and I think they can do it. And I don't underestimate what I'm saying. I'm being totally sincere here. It is going to be a struggle for every team in the Canadian Football League this year to make it to the playoffs, because I don't think I can remember, Morley, a stronger CFL set of teams than I've seen last year, and I predict will be this year.
But Morley,
I
if for Edmonton to make it, someone has to not make it. Who do you see as the vulnerable team?
BC, Winnipeg, Calgary. I think those 3 teams in Edmonton might kind of be fighting for playoff position throughout. I think Saskatchewan, if especially if Trevor Harris stays healthy, which he hasn't done for his 2 years in Saskatchewan, I think if he stays healthy, they might be the best team right now. And of course, a lot has to play out between now and Tuesday, and then Tuesday in training camp, right? But looking at the changes, I mean, Edmonton's made a lot of changes. They've added a lot of good players, but they got to play well, and they got to be better. So I think right now maybe Saskatchewan looks like the team in the West right now, but I see Calgary, Winnipeg, and BC with Edmonton. Any of them could finish second, third, fourth, or fifth. I think BC's probably lost a little. Winnipeg has lost a lot too. They've lost what Winnipeg's lost is crucial. They've lost some veteran guys. Adam Bighill's gone. Wolotarski's gone. It's Kenny Lawler's gone. They're going to have some issues, I think, leadership wise. But they've still got a really good quarterback, a really good running back, and they'll have some good receivers at the end of the day as well. So I think it's going to be an absolute dogfight in the West.
And it will be in the East too.
I don't know if Saskatchewan's going to be that good. They, might be a 5-team race. Really, we'll have to wait and see. I'm right now. I'm going to say Edmonton might get 500, 9 wins, maybe 10.
That'll get them in the playoffs.
I would think so. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
David,
I agree with that. Like I think I do think Saskatchewan. I mean, they've made some really shrewd moves this offseason. Like just some under the radar moves that maybe didn't expect, and they've just added. They've been very calculated, I think, with their moves. But this is already a team that had a pretty good established core. I still think Calgary is a team that they've made they got Vernon there, they brought over Malade, but I don't see that shift in what's been kind of hurting them the last few years. So I think Calgary's still a team that's not getting me excited. And look, Winnipeg was vulnerable last year, and I don't know if
they had that horrible start. You're right.
Yeah.
They had that horrible start, and I just kind of alluded to the veteran aspect of it. I think it was the veterans that were able to help them turn it around. Now a lot of those guys aren't going to be there.
And Edmonton took one of their top defensive backs, and we didn't even talk about the Ford brothers reuniting in Edmonton. Like,
yep.
That's going to be fun.
Are they sharing a house? What's going to happen there?
I am not sure what their living arrangements will be, but I'm sure it'll be a little easier if Tyrell picks off Trey in practice rather than in a game this year. So it's that he's Trey's more athletic, but Tyrell's right behind him, and that's a really good ad. And he's a guy, a Canadian who can play the corner. Those guys are important guys. That shifts the ratio for you and allows you to put an extra American maybe on the defensive line or somewhere else in your lineup. So Yeah, that's one thing the Elks have really done is beefed up their Canadian content with the signings. Robbie Smith and Tyrell Ford and Royce Metier and David Beard, and a lot of their signings were Canadian signings, and
Yeah, we were surprised by Metier going. It's a local kid here in Toronto.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I heard stories, and I don't know what the truth is. You hear all sorts of stories leaking out, but that the Argos were asking a lot of guys to take pay cuts, and a lot of guys didn't like it. Maybe that's part of the reason why there's an exodus out of the Argonauts camp right now.
Well,
from what I understand,
they're trying to keep 2 MVPs of Grey Cups as quarterback. I think there's a lot of money tied up there.
I think, from what I understand, is the team basically said, "This is what we can afford to give you. If you find something else better, this is what we can afford." Right?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened in Edmonton with Brett Boyko, who was a really good tackle for the Elks last year on the O-line. They were trying to rework his deal. He had a bonus coming, and I think from what I understand, Ed Hervey said, "This is what we can give you, but what we'll do is we'll release you, and you can feel things out on Sunday and see if there's any market for you, and if not, this contract's waiting for you." And I imagine he probably gave him a time deadline to come back to him, and then on Sunday, they announced a deal with Brett Boyko, or came out Monday, I guess. But yeah, so and he returned. So I think a lot of guys were in that boat saying, "Okay, here's what we're going to offer you. Go out and take a look. If you get a better deal, God bless you."
Yeah, that's the Dinwiddie effect here in Toronto. He truly believes that.
Right, and so it's going to be very interesting with all these moves, and there's still a lot of moves that can happen. Like we're talking about the tampering window, then there's the actual free agency window, and like some teams, they kind of maybe wait for the dust to settle a little bit here. But like if I'm looking at deals that have been made so far, like never would I have expected Kenny Lawler to leave Winnipeg, right? To go to Hamilton. That to me, that was a bit of a shocker. I know he had a lot of offers out there, so it obviously drove the price up, but didn't expect Hamilton to be the one to pay, because they haven't really paid receivers. They've kind of gone with like a group, kind of a committee, rather than.
And now they got 2 high-priced ones, right? With Tim White and Kenny Lawler. But Lawler and Bo Levi, that could be a pretty potent combination.
Hamilton's our Edmonton in the East Division.
They're taking your guys too, eh?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean it in the sense of they're ready to bust out. Yeah, and they've been a better team than their results have shown.
Well, it's funny. I think they were 2 of the better teams at the tail end of last season, but neither of them could just get that extra win to get them into the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. But they showed both teams, have a lot of hard luck, at losing games. That's part of the reason why I say it's going to be a very tough 9 teams. Like here, David, I'm going to flip the question back at both of you a different way. Who are going to be the 2 worst teams in the Canadian Football League next year? Just the 2. Who are going to be the 2 worst teams in the Canadian Football League? It's easy to say Calgary. I'll give you
Calgary. I already have Calgary as 1. I think Ottawa could be in for a disappointing year, just because Hamilton's getting better. Montreal's still a good team. I just don't know if Ottawa took a dip at the end of the year. Their defense got exposed big time, and they had a really good home record, and they won games that maybe could have been a coin flip too for them. They had a really good start, and they kind of tailed at the end. So I'd say Ottawa and Calgary are my 2 teams.
It's early to try and predict that, but I would say Calgary and BC in the West will struggle, and Ottawa and maybe Toronto in the East. I mean, who's Toronto got? They've lost so many guys, and they haven't, by that I can recall, come to agreements on a lot of guys so far this week. So we'll have to see what kind of shape they're in, and what's Chad Kelly going to be like. Is he going to be ready to go when the season starts?
They're saying yes. The coach said he's ready. He'll be ready to go. They're convinced
ready to go, but will he be good enough? That's
it's
not an easy. I don't think that's an easy injury to come back from, for sure. So, there's a lot of question marks in Toronto. Drew Brown's the question mark in Ottawa. I mean, if he gets healthy and if he stays healthy,
I like him
and plays through. I really like him. He's got Geno Lewis as a target now, and Geno Lewis makes quarterbacks look good. So that could be what turns it for Ottawa, for sure.
Yeah, I'm a little bit Ottawa, and I'm concerned about Toronto since I cover them. But I would basically say Calgary and Ottawa are the ones that are most, uh, uh, to me, have the most to do to get out from the cellar. Is all the only point I was trying to make is that which teams are you can't point at any other team. I mean, Hamilton looks like they're going to improve. If Boley by Mitchell picks up where he left off, they're going to be challenging for at least second in Hamilton. So, challenging, not taking it, but they'll be challenging for it. I like the looks of the CFL right now. I think every fan base. I'm happy to see the Knothole Gang's probably a little more happy. It's been, as you said, it's been, and for those of you that don't know, the Knothole Gang is a notorious group of people who didn't like paying. Well, not didn't like paying, but didn't pay for tickets. Would look through a wooden fence to watch football games, and they
Back in the
even
old
out at
days,
the club.
yeah,
Yeah,
and then they turned it into a kids section, which
they
they
did.
still do now, right? And they sell cheaper tickets to kids and their parents. So yeah, the Knothole Gang, they all lined up outside the fence at Clark Stadium back in the day, and were able to
Back
find
in
a
the
way to
day.
watch the game, looking through the holes or underneath it.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to digress there, but I always the history. Well, I'm going to take a right turn here. The history we didn't concentrate on this at all. We might have glazed over it. The former greatness of the Edmonton Elks, and besides the name change, which I think a lot of fans resent because, in fact, I saw one fan posted as the Elks, Edmonton has been the worst team that any team could be. It's almost to suggest the name was the reason why they didn't play well. I don't think that has anything to do with it. But speak to us about, give us a drill in a little deeper about the pride and Edmonton. We know about the Oilers, we know about the greatness that's been in Edmonton, but I don't think there's been a better franchise in sport if you erase the last 10 years in
Yeah,
any
they've
sport.
always they've always had the fan base there, and I think the fan base is still there, still passionate. But they, over the last 4 years, they just got worn out. I mean, they got tired, and they just don't buy tickets right now, or didn't in the last few years. That's changing. I hear ticket sales are going pretty well for 2025, and I think if they win some games, especially early, their attendance will come back a little bit. But I mean, you go back, 50,000 at games, right, back in the day. So yeah, for sure. They've always been a great franchise. And I think that's why the fall for them over the last, 4 years has been pretty hard and pretty hard to take for the fan base. I mean, it's really was the perfect storm. Everything went wrong for them. First, it was COVID. Then it was the losing streak at home, the
Yeah.
name change, and not making the playoffs since 2019. I mean, everything came together for the Elks in the wrong way as far as their fan base goes. They changed the name, and people are still upset about that. People still don't like the fact that they changed the name. I'm actually quite surprised at how vocal that group still is. It's been 5 years now, right? The change has been made, and the Elks are doing their best to kind of make those people happy by going with the double E logo more than going with the Elks logo. So yeah, but it's been I feel for Elks fans because it's been very, very difficult. And the Elks fans, and dare I say the broadcasters, have been the
Oh
only
yeah.
guys who have been here through this whole mess, since COVID ended, right? And I mean it hasn't been fun. It hasn't been fun. I mean, they were bad teams, really bad teams, especially in 21. And then when Chris Jones came in 22 and 23, 2022 was a cleanup year, right? And then everyone figured things would be better in 23, and they never got better in 23. And then they started 0-7 under Jones last year before they ended up firing him. And obviously it was the right move because it kind of sparked things. I think it sparked things in the organization a little bit. The fans came back. They won a few games, got a little better feel to it. Then they made the changes. Then they made the changes in the offseason. And for the first time probably since going into the Eastern Final in I think it was in Hamilton or Ottawa? It was in Hamilton in 2019. Going into the Eastern Final, that's the last time this organization and the fan base really was on top of things and really felt good about the way the team was playing. And since then, it's been way more losses than wins. It's been really a tough ride.
It's been also a tough. the media is kind of, they love a winner, right? And especially local media. You guys have
Well,
been
you know what?
challenged.
I'll get on my horse a little bit here. The media
Please.
in Edmonton has just ignored the Elks over the last several
I,
years. I mean, there's nobody. Dave, my partner Dave, and I, and Global Edmonton are about the only people who go to practice. We're the only people who go to practice on a regular basis. Dave and I are the only guys there every day. Global comes once a week, but we haven't had a newspaper guy. Post Media hasn't been to a game or practice in 2 years. I mean, that's how do you do that? That's and
we have
maybe
the
winning's
same
going to bring
question
people
here.
back. I don't know.
Same issue in
We have,
Toronto. How many
we
of
have
them
the
go to
same question.
Edmonton Oilers games, Morley versus Elks games?
Media wise,
Yeah.
oh, it's loaded. It's the press box is full, right? So yeah, it's everybody's there. It just for whatever reason, like I go out at Elks games, I'll go out into the main press box at halftime, and there's rarely any, especially mainstream media there. There's some podcasters, and there's some online bloggers and stuff, but there is not that mainstream media is just not there right now. And maybe it comes back when they wins. I was really happy to see the 2 news conference for Chris Morris, the 3 news conferences for Chris Morris, for Ed Hervey especially, and for Mark Killam. Everybody was out, so that was good to see. So hopefully that'll carry on. And in fact, the local TSN reporter even asked a question to Ed Hervey saying, "Are you going to have the last time you were GM, you closed the dressing room to media? Are you going to do that again?" And I thought, well, if he had and Hervey said the dressing room is going to be open, there's no issues there, and he's changed on his stance on that. But I'm thinking, like, you haven't been to a practice or game in 2 years. Why are you asking that question?
Yeah.
So,
Hervey had that reputation back the last time he was there about that
yeah, for
locker
sure.
room, right?
He had some issues with some members of the media. There's no doubt about that. But those guys are retired, I think, to a certain extent, some of them, and Ed knows that he's got to get the media on his side this year. He's been very accommodating this year. Like I sat down with him on Monday for 20 minutes and had a conversation with him. And he's very open about what was going on that week and how he was doing things. And he's I've always really enjoyed talking to Ed Hervey because he's got a mind for this, and I think he's a different guy than he was last time he was here. He's going to do things a little differently, and I think that'll help him. And I think he'll be here for longer, and he'll probably have more success than he had last time as well. And he was pretty successful that time too.
Yeah, he had a lot of lessons that he learned that last time here. He got burned a couple of
Well,
times.
yeah, and he had some interesting situations, right? He got fired here after a good season, and then he ended up going to BC, and there was some things going on there that he ended up I think he ended up resigning, and then he was out of the game for a little while. Then he came back to Hamilton, was a scout, and worked his way back up to become general manager the last couple of years. So he's got a great football mind, and he can find talent, and I think he's learned a little bit more about that general manager's job, and he's much more equipped for it coming in this time than he was last time.
Well,
that was his first time too last time, right? First time as a general manager. So
yeah. There's a learning curve.
Now we got a couple minutes with you, Morley. Got to ask because it is Super Bowl week. Who's your pick for the big game?
My brain says Kansas City, and my heart says Philadelphia. I'm firmly on the I'm tired of Kansas City train. They're a great team. They're fun to watch, and Patrick Mahomes is brilliant at times. And but I'd like to see somebody different win it. I think Philadelphia's got a better team. I don't know if they'll play better in the moment or not. That's the one thing Kansas City does is they grasp the moment. I mean, I was talking this morning actually with Aaron Grimes, former Elk, and now he's a defensive backs coach, and he spent a year with the Philadelphia Eagles, and we were talking to him about on our show this morning, talking to him about the game, and he said he's obviously cheering for Philadelphia and wants them to win, but he said if they don't have a 2-score lead with 5 minutes to go, they're going to lose because Kansas City, if you give them the ball with less than 5 minutes to go and they're down, they're going to win the game. They're going to come back and win because that's just what they do time after time after time. How many times have we seen it? Ask the Buffalo Bills about it. It's just they're a good team. They're a great team. I think Philadelphia might be a little bit more talented and better in certain situations, but I mean, if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man, right? And it's hard to pick against Kansas City till they lose. So we'll see. It should be a good game, though. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's all what's riding in this being a great Super Bowl. A lot of people are thinking that if they walk away after Philly wins, it'll be a great Super Bowl. There's going to be a giant sigh if Kansas City wins. So the excitement actually before the game is very, very quiet, and the excitement after the game is going to be even quieter if Kansas City wins.
Yeah, it might be all on Saquon Barkley and how well he plays.
Oh
He's
yeah,
been so good. If the Eagles can get a lead and then just feed him the ball and keep the clock moving and help him, if he just collects first downs, they'll have a better opportunity. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Should be a good game.
You got a couple of seconds, David, before we go?
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a great game, and I think, yeah, Kansas City has a roadmap to win. The Eagles, maybe they'll learn from the last time they played Kansas City in the Super Bowl. Maybe just be nice to the refs, just be nice to the refs, and hopefully they'll be nice to them.
Morley,
that was a first down, man. That was a first down.
Morley, tell us where you are, where people can find you.
All right. If you're in the Edmonton area, 880 Ched, I'm on this morning as part of the morning show, and you can catch me on the Tweety box, or the Twitex as I call it now, at Morley_Scott, and that's probably where I hang out most. Same handle, Morley_Scott at Instagram as well. But if you follow me on Instagram, you're probably just going to see pictures of my grandson. So that's about it. So
there you go, David.
Yeah, follow myself at D_Morsudi, and follow my work over at sportsnet.ca.
And you just look under Candid Frank Live, whether it be on all the social media, you'll find me. I want to thank you, Morley, for taking the time to be here. It really was something we were excited about, because Edmonton's been very impactful on the team that we cover. So it was very, very good to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time with us.
It's fun, guys. It's always great to talk CFL football in the offseason. It's
Absolutely.
not done enough, I don't think. So it's certainly been a busy week for news. So, yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. David, thanks again as usual.
Thank you, Frank.
For Morley and David, I'm Candid Frank. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time. It was a lot of fun, and the Super Bowl's happening. It should be great.